You guys are good.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone joining from all over the world. We want to thank you for making time to be with us today. This is a wonderful occasion, and we'd first like to begin our session by saying a big thank you to Dr. Marjorie Ireland and the entire planning committee for putting together this wonderful biennial event where there are wonderful workshops, very informative and engaging speakers to help you with all manner of things related to the college search and application processes. My name is Marilyn Scott, and I am the Assistant Dean of Student Transitions at African Leadership Academy, located in Johannesburg, South Africa. My colleagues and I are pleased to present to you this workshop, which is called Anatomy of an Application, Putting the Pieces Together at a Time of COVID. Now, we recognize that this is an exciting time for thinking about the college search and application processes, but it's also very daunting, to be quite honest with you. But you are in excellent hands with the speakers who are here today, because this is an important part of your journey, putting that application together. There are so many aspects of it. What does one college value versus what another college thinks is important? But we know that the folks who are about to speak to you today have wonderful insights. So without any further ado, we'd like to just say thank you very much for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Felton. I have the pleasure of getting us started. I should go into my section now?
If we can just do a quick introduction and then we'll get back into the
Then we'll do that. Okay. Hello, everyone. Sean Felton. I'm Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And I've been here for just over 18 years. And great to be with you today to talk about some really important information and things that are happening in your world right now.
All right, everyone. Well, my name is Jua Howard. I am an assistant director in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of California, Berkeley. I've been with the institution for going on 11 years now, and I'm excited to share my part of the presentation after Sean gives you some really important information. And thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jason LaPerriere. I work at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. I've been at Wheaton around 6 years and been in the field of college admission for about 15, 16 years already. So really excited to help you all through this process.
And Hi, everyone. My name is Caterina Caris Flores. I am an admissions counselor at Bryn Mawr College. Can't really see it because it's right there, but I have been in admissions now for about 2 years. So I recently graduated from college as well, so I can give my perspective about that as well.
Wonderful. Now I'll roll into the session. Again, Sean Felton coming to you live from my living room here in Ithaca, New York. I was just on campus. So we're going to talk about the anatomy of an application. And, the application asks for a lot of different types of information. And we're going to talk through all those different types of information. But at the heart of this is we're trying to get to know you. We want to consider your candidacy, consider your preparation, your readiness for our individual institutions. All of our institutions and every college that you might apply to or look at is going to have departments and majors and opportunities. And those moments on those campuses, they need people. They need students like you for them to matter and to be operational. And so it's important that we find the students that meet our needs at the particular institution you're applying for. We also want to find students that are ready to be citizens, students, members of our communities, again, at the various colleges that you're looking at. So we're trying to get to know you. We're really sort of focused initially, as the application is concerned, on your personalized or individualized context. And so at the very beginning of the application, we ask you for a lot of demographics. Where do you live? What languages are spoken in your home? What does it look like in terms of your going home? do you have parents? Do you have step parents? Do you have guardians? Siblings? Are there any siblings in your family? Or do you have any brothers or sisters is actually how you probably are thinking about it. Siblings is our word. And, have they attended college or not? Again, this understanding of, who's around you. The question about family and siblings is really about sort of ascertaining your familiarity with college going, the application process. The process is tricky. I'm sure all of you are finding that out. It's complex, it's tricky, there's a lot to know and understand. Going to sessions like this and others is going to be really helpful for you. But universities want to sort of understand, how are you doing this? How are you sort of making it through this process potentially? We're also looking to see, what your preparation is like. Are you taking classes? Are you ready, taking the kinds of classes you need to be ready for a particular institution? So a lot of great questions. Again, context is everything in this process, and we are just trying to get to know you. And that's why we ask all of those questions, and that's why it takes a little bit of time to fill out the earlier portion of the application that you're using for the institution that you're applying to. Something else I wanted to mention besides demographics are two other things. One of those is school profile. So the school that you attend provides us your school context, and that helps us, or that's important because we want to understand where you are, what's available to you in terms of courses, opportunities, the environment, and we're looking to see what you're taking advantage of in that environment at that school. What classes are you taking advantage of? What classes are the ones that you've chosen with guidance from teachers and counselors and others who are there to support you? And that's because we want to sort of make sure that you're a match for who we're looking for. You've probably already done a little bit of matching with us in terms of determining with the particular institutions you're applying to, which ones have the major that matters to you, which one has the offerings, the activities, the other experiences that matter to you. And so from our perspective, knowing about your school context, knowing about the offerings at the school, and oftentimes at schools, there's a guidance counselor or an assistant principal or someone who writes a recommendation letter for you on your behalf, on behalf of the school for you. And that individual provides us, as a part of the school report, it's called, provides us a little bit more of your school context. What are you like as a member of the class that you might be graduating secondary school or high school with? Where are you in that larger sort of framework? Jason's going to talk about the sort of more micro look in just a second with regard to recommendation letters, but the counselor really does provide us more of that sort of macro look, if you will. What are you like in the larger sort of scheme of things as the class at your school is concerned, as concerns all of the activities and accomplishments and things that you've done? What are you like at that school historically and in the moment? That's really important for us to know. And then the last thing that's important for us, again, all the information we gather, we utilize, we think about it, we consider it with respect to the institution that we work for. The last thing is really engagement, involvement, extracurriculars. We know that COVID-19 pandemic for the last 20 months has really limited your ability to be involved outside the classroom. It may have even limited your ability to be at your school in person for periods of time, or access to the resources provided by your school, whether or not virtual opportunities were available. So we're aware of that. And so we're making adjustments on this side of the process as we're considering candidates. So no need to worry about that. But in terms of the things that you might do outside of the classroom, whether it's sports, maybe it's, the student assembly, student government, it could be ROTC. You could babysit, you might have a job. I had a job when I was in high school. I had a job when I was in college too. All those things matter to us. If you're babysitting younger siblings, I was the youngest, didn't have to worry about that. My older siblings took care of that though. But maybe you do any one of those things I just mentioned and even more. That's all important to us because it's a part of that context, your individual context that we're looking at as we consider what have you accomplished and what does that look like in the scheme, the larger scheme of who you are and where you've attended school, and really what opportunities have you had access to. You don't have access to everything because of where you live, because of your home life, because of the requirements that might be sort of surrounding you as an individual. These are the kinds of questions and things that we think about when we're considering candidates for admission to our institutions. So just some information there I wanted to share with you. I'm going to pass things along to my colleague Joa to talk about testing and the PIQs. What's that?
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everybody, again. So just kind of going in, moving into another part of the application that is very important and seems to be a lot of times fills a lot of students with a lot of anxiety. It's starting just talking about testing and what that looks like. And through the last 20 months, as Sean's mentioned, all the different changes that we've gone through, testing is one of those kind of the biggest changes that a lot of schools have kind of undergone to kind of best benefit you all as students due to tests not being offered, canceled, maybe offered in person. Students didn't feel safe taking them. It's a lot of different factors. And so a lot of schools made a lot of changes to, again, best benefit you all. So some testing policies we definitely want you to think about per school as you're looking at each individual school, and what they are requiring is very, very important. So for instance, testing, the ACT and SAT, you have certain schools that are still requiring them. It has not changed. It did not change during the pandemic. So if you are applying to these schools, you need to be very mindful of that to make sure that you have completed these exams, you have tests that you can send to them, you're proud of them, whatever that may be, but understand that that is still a part of their process. However, you've also had schools that have changed to being test optional. Now, you've had schools that have been test optional for quite some time, but a lot of other schools changed to being test optional, meaning that if you have taken the SAT or ACT, you are very proud of your score, you want them to be considered with your overall application, you can definitely submit those scores and they can be considered. Now, if you decide, hey, I couldn't take the exam, or I took the exam, I didn't do as well as I would have liked to, I really don't want them to consider that, you do not have to submit your scores, and those institutions will consider all of the other information that you provide to them in your application, and you will not be at a detriment. It will not negatively affect you because they do not have your test score. When they say test optional, they mean test optional. But also think about this, if you take those exams and you don't score as well, and then you submit those scores, and then you're giving them the basically approval to consider your scores with the rest of your application. So you have to ultimately think about, do you want to submit those scores? Again, if you are dealing with a test optional school, then you also have schools that are test blind, or as we say at Berkeley and the UC system, test free. Basically, that means that we do not consider the SAT or ACT at all in the process. Even if you submit them to us, we will not see them. So those have been completely taken off the table. Now, they may play a part after you come to our campus, maybe for placement, but in the admissions process, those tests are not a part of our process. And that's very important to understand that, and understand the different policies per school. You have to do your research to understand which each particular school is asking you for. Now, also, when we get into AP exam, IB exam scores, International Baccalaureate scores, your subject exams, if you've taken them before, the College Board eliminated those scores. Those are other things that you may want to submit. Most of the time, those are supplemental. They're not mandatory at our schools, but a lot of times, if you want them to be considered, you want to show your mastery in a certain area, subject area, go ahead and provide them to us. Sometimes you'll even receive college credit when you come to us. Again, that depends on the school. Sometimes it may not make a difference, but the bottom line is those are additional exams that you may want to submit for students who may even be international students. If you have an English proficiency exam component, you may have to submit a TOEFL score, IELTS, Duolingo. That's also something else you need to consider based on the school, and if it's necessary. Sometimes it's not, depending on your academic background and where you may attend school. Now, kind of bridging from testing, because that's a lot, we're going to move into another really, really important part of the application, which is dealing with your essays. And Sean talked about context. He said that several times, and that's so key to what we do. Your essays give us a lot of valuable context about your world, what makes you tick, what do you think you're going to contribute to our respective campuses. And there are different formats. If you're looking at, let's say, the Common App, where you have maybe 2 longer essays, that's one format. For us at UC Berkeley, we have, or the UC system as a whole, we have what we call personal insight questions, PIQs. These are short answer questions. There are 8 of them. You guys have to answer 4 out of the 8, 350 words per response. They are short answer. So you got to get to the point and answer the question. And so depending on the format, your approach at answering these essays are going to be very different. So you need to think about that. If you have supplemental essays as well, are there different approaches to that? What are they asking you? Are there word limits? So that needs to be the first and foremost, so that you understand what's being asked of you, so that you follow instructions, because it sounds common sense, but not everyone does it. And then more importantly, when you get beyond that, just the content. And that's regarding the PIQ, the longer essays, whatever. You need to be authentic. That is one of the best things that you can do when we talk about context. You need to bring your full self into this process for us to be able to get the chance to know you. So be authentic, focus on you. It is not about anybody else. It's not about your mom or your dad or a best friend. It's not about them, it's about you. I always say, if you spend the bulk of the time talking about someone else, then maybe we need to admit that person and maybe not you. They sound wonderful. So that's something to think about. So you need to focus on you. In addition, if you talk about, let's say, an obstacle that you have had to face in your life, that is okay. Tell us about it, but you need to spend a small percentage telling us about what happened, and the bulk of it telling us about how have you grown through this process. What have you learned? How are you still persevering and working through this particular obstacle? That's the reflection piece. That word always kind of sticks with me when I think of the essays. Reflection. That helps us get to know you better. So really think about that. And then I'll say this as well, and this is definitely for the PIQs, because you don't have a lot of words to work with in getting to the point. Be very careful about how creative that you are with your essays. Some students are very excellent creative writers, and they spend a lot of time to write poetry. They are very abstract in their essays. And sometimes, unfortunately, that misses the mark, because I don't learn anything else about you except that you're a great writer, but I haven't learned anything else about you as a person. And again, that's about focusing on you. So be very careful about, again, how creative you get with it and making sure that your personality shines. And that's really what you're trying to get to. You want your voice to be heard, your personality shine. We get to hear about you from you in your words. So be very focused on that. And final piece, we have what we call additional comment boxes, and these are in their Common app. Their Common has one that's specific to the pandemic. At the UC application, we have a couple of additional comment boxes. These are for additional contextual information that you think is important for us to consider. Let's say you've had a bad semester for whatever reason. Maybe you've been in a car accident, you've had to go through rehabilitation, your grades have dropped. Maybe you got that 1 D out of all A's. This is where you explain to us what's going on, what happened. So that gives us that additional context to be able to connect all the dots. If you go to a school that has a very odd grading system, maybe, and it's not clear, you may want to explain that there as well. So any additional context, again, that you think is going to clear up any gray areas, any potential red flags, as I say, that you think is, hey, this is what's going on. You're being transparent. You're very much articulating what the matter is. And again, and giving me the chance to connect the dots. And I always say, I get it. Okay, I see what's going on. That's what the additional comment boxes are. Please utilize them. That is a part of your story, all right? And we want, again, getting to know you, need to see the full story. So utilize that as well. And that is my time. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jason to kind of take us into another key part, talking about letters of recommendation.
Thank you so much, Jua. Really appreciate that. Context is the buzzword of the day, it seems. Letters of recommendation are so critical to that. As Sean so wonderfully mentioned, school counselors, most institutions will require a recommendation from your guidance or college counselor, providing that context for you within your school, graduating class, that macro level. Teachers giving that micro level insight. Do you pay attention in class? Are you coming to extra help sessions? Are you turning in your work on time? How do you interact with your, classmates in those science labs? Are you taking a leadership role and maybe helping those around you? A piece of advice that I always give to students when to think about who might write those letters of recommendation: who has the most to say about you? Maybe it isn't that teacher that you've had the most number of times because you really like them and they've given you the most A's that are on your transcript. Maybe it's that teacher that really put you in your place. Maybe you didn't get along with them at first, but they challenged you, and maybe they saw you struggle and overcome and persevere. Those are the kinds kinds of things that we like to hear about when reviewing applications. How do you overcome a challenge? So know that that we really do read these letters of recommendation and take their recommendations to heart when making our decisions. So most institutions are requiring those two letters of recommendation, but you might have folks in your life who have additional insight to provide. That job supervisor. I had a job in high school working 15, 20 hours a week at Dunkin' Donuts. My job supervisor there knew me inside and out. I was there at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings making the coffee. So, that has something to say when you're that person that shows up regularly, getting up earlier than on the weekends than you do for school. So know that we're happy to hear those additional insights, whether it's that job supervisor, coach, church leader, whoever it might be. If they have additional insight to provide, know that we want to hear that insight. Some tips with regard to letters of recommendation. These folks are busy. You see your teachers busy running between class. They want to help you, but you have to help them and be respectful of their time. So think about who you might want to write those letters and give them plenty of lead time before your deadlines. I won't throw out any examples just because I know schools have their own internal deadlines, but respect those, give them strong buffers. Think about these folks over the summer when you're thinking about applying, if you can. Allow them to write the best possible letters that they can. Hope that's helpful insight on letters of recommendation. I will turn things over to Katerina.
Thanks, Jason. So hi, everyone. Like I said, my name is Katerina, and I'm going to be talking about three main components. So the resume portion of your application, the interview section, and also I'll talk about it. This tends to usually be like an optional part of the application, but submitting a portfolio. So I personally love seeing resumes that students do because nowadays, people really love making them very creative and colorful. And I think that really showcases your personality. But basically the resume, when you include it in your application, it really just showcases another part of your identity. Context, like everyone has been saying today, is just a really important part of, the application. And I think the resume also gives you the space to include any other extracurricular activities, maybe include some of your favorite classes that you've taken, maybe include your AP test scores. Sometimes I see students will include those things on their resume, especially if maybe they ran out of room on the Common App, because that's totally fine, to include those extra key points for us as admissions counselors to really understand, where you're coming from in the context of your school and whatnot. But essentially a resume should have your personal details, such as, your name. We want to know your name. Also, you can add your home address. You can add your email, maybe a phone number in case, you want the admissions office to contact you. It needs to have your school information, where do you go to school? Just, the name pretty much, and maybe the location. It needs to have awards and accomplishments, pretty much says it in the name. You can also include some relevant coursework. So let's say you're applying to a very specific program at UC Berkeley. You really want to make sure that you highlight that in your application. So, maybe including a program that you really want to be a part of there while connecting it to the classes that you've taken in high school that relate to that program. You also need to include extracurricular activities. This can include, taking care of siblings. This can include, jobs that you've had, or just clubs that you've been a part of, or community service work, things like that. You could also include hobbies as well, because I think what COVID taught us is that we all need to be flexible. And I think a lot of admissions counselors and admissions offices around the globe, especially in the United States, have really seen that, some students have lost different types of participation that they had in the past. So I think it's really important just to showcase, other parts of your identity that make you unique. I also think, including special skills that you have are really important as well. So also the goal of a resume is to try and fit this on one page, maybe to 1.5 pages, but really just try to aim for the 1 page, really make those margins very small. That's a key. But yeah, so then interviews. I personally love interviews because one, I love hearing what students have to say, but also I love to hear why you want to go to this specific school. So for me, like I said, I'm an admissions counselor at Bryn Mawr, and I actually went to Bryn Mawr, coincidentally enough. So I personally really love hearing students talk about like those specific details in the interview as to why they want to go to Bryn Mawr. But I think interviews also provide a really great space to explain maybe something that is different on your transcript, maybe explaining like an event that was really critical to your growth, things like that. Like I think the interview is just a really great space to connect with the admissions counselor of your territory, maybe a current senior interviewer, who's a student at Bryn Mawr, or maybe connect with an alum. I think like the interview is a really great space to do that. But also definitely recommend that even if a school says an interview is optional, you still should do it, because I think practicing your interview skills are really, really important. Trust me, as someone who graduated high school not too long ago, I really wish I had done more interview options, because I think it can be hard to kind of practice that. But starting in high school is really important. And then finally, for the portfolio. So essentially, sometimes I see this when I'm reading applications, but students will submit a arts or visual supplement portfolio where you can showcase different art or visual, things that you are passionate about. Maybe like you love to paint, you love sculpture, you love photography, you love making movies, things like that. But typically, this is an optional part of the application, so it's not required that you submit it. But let's say you really want to become a art major. I'm just making this up, but let's say you really want to become an art major at a specific school. To make yourself stand out even more from the other applicants who are also applying to that same major program, maybe you should include that, art supplement, because that will really help you stand out. But maybe the school also does require that for you to be an art major or maybe a film studies major, you have to submit those additional parts of your application to help you stand out. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. But I'm excited to answer any questions that anyone has.
Well, thank you so much, panelists, Sean, Jua, Jason, and Katarina. Folks, we would like for you to please place your questions in the Q&A chat box, and that way our panelists will see it and that they will be able to discuss the aspects that you're talking about. But you've all shared wonderful pieces, and I think, Jason, you said it best when you said that Sean said it well about context, that all of these pieces of the application really are about putting you in context for the rest of the students who are going to be applying to these wonderful colleges all over the world. My first question to you, and I'd like for you to handle this one, Jason, is what is the most important part of the application? That's something that we hear all the time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marilyn. For me, I think the transcript is so incredibly important. I'm going to butcher a metaphor that was shared with me one time, but the transcript, if you're baking a cake, the transcript is the actual cake. Everything else is frosting and decoration. You need that base foundation to build off of. Ultimately, we want to know that you are going to be academically successful at our institution. I remember, thinking in high school, like, oh gosh, my school only offers, these 2 AP classes. How can I possibly compete with other applicants? And I'm here to tell you that the word of the day is context. We want to know how you're doing within what's available to you. So know that school profile that we're going to receive is going to help us understand what you've done with what's available. Maybe your school offers advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment classes, and that's great if you took advantage of those and challenged yourself. A big piece of transcript review is evaluating what we call the rigor of your curriculum, but we're doing that within taking into account what's available to you at your your school. Grades are incredibly important on that transcript. We want to see what kinds of classes you took, but also want to see how you did. Know that we are looking at things like trends. Maybe you had a rough start in that first year, but each and every year you increased your grade performance, and maybe you increased your rigor. You started taking, the standard college prep in your first year, and started adding those more challenging courses from year to year while improving your grade performance. We're paying attention and noticing those kinds of things. So know that that context is so incredibly important in so many ways, and looking at those trends can help us see, maybe this person had a rough start, but that doesn't mean they won't be academically successful at our institutions just because, they went through a rough time in that first year. They were able to overcome that and move on a positive trajectory. So to come back to that core, that transcript is so important because we want you to succeed academically at our institutions.
Thank you so much, Jason. Katerina, I wonder if you would be able to answer this next one. Do you connect the applicant with alumni to ask questions about the school and their life after graduation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say if this is in the context of the interview, I'm assuming it is. But yes, so at Bryn Mawr, like in particular, and I'm sure other schools do this as well, but we like to connect students with alum, especially if they are interested in learning about something in particular. I think something really important that admissions counselors do really well at is that we try to find alum or tour guides or other current students at the school that connect or that have a similar background to an applicant, for example. So let's say I was interviewing an applicant and they said, I am really interested in becoming a veterinary or a veterinarian, like what do I do? And I would probably be like, oh, let me do some research and find a Bryn Mawr alum, for example, that you can connect with and learn about like their academic background and the classes that they took and like the pre-med track and things like that. So typically I do that as an admissions counselor, especially since we are a smaller school. We're about like 1,400 students. So it's easy to kind of do that and find those connections. But sometimes other schools, like I know that they have their different processes when it comes to like connecting students with tour guides or alum and things like that. But I personally enjoy doing that because I want a applicant to see themselves in another student's shoes at the school.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Sean, I'm wondering if you can please take the next question.
Absolutely. Martina asks, how important is it securing an internship while still in high school for your college applications? And my mind goes back to our sort of very brief talk about extracurriculars, engagement. Internships will be a part of that. And honestly, internships, if you have a chance to do them, they're great. If you want to do them, they're great. People like me, admissions officers, particular institutions, we're not requiring that students have internships as a part of their undergraduate admissions application or on their resumes. The resume that you have is the one that you decide, you determine, you create for yourself, and it should be based upon your interest, what you have access to, because it's possible that, I may not have access to this internship that you might have access to. And so, you should do that internship if you want to, because you want to do it. Never, never, never do anything outside of the classroom for the admissions committee, because we shouldn't be dictating your life. We don't want to be doing that. We want you to do the things that matter to you, that you care about. Use your time as you would like to outside of school, outside of the classroom, in activities, because that's how we sort of see, as Joa mentioned earlier, that's another way we see your authentic self, as we're looking at your context. So never, ever, ever think that an internship or any activity is required by an admissions committee, because it is not. If there are things that you might want to do, that you might choose to do to sort of help strengthen your application or your interest and or regard in a certain area, that's perfectly fine. And talk to your school counselor, talk to a teacher, talk to a family member to really sort of think about those opportunities, if what they might be for you, and if they make sense for you.
Jua, could you please take the next question?
Sure. Thank you, Marilyn. And the next question we have is from Brandon. Thank you, Brandon. And Brandon, you're asking, how long does an admissions officer usually analyze a student's application? And how many people are looking at one application? And that's a great question. And I think probably in admissions are one of our, most frequently used phrases is it depends, which is very much in this case, it depends, depending on the school and how we each go through our admission processes, how many applications do we receive and then what that may look like. Some people may read in committee. I know that's term is utilized quite a bit, but that looks different for everybody. It may require, maybe depending on if it's a regional based model, Brandon, where, let's say myself, I handle the Mid-Atlantic and I read all the applicants from the Mid-Atlantic. I may be the first reader on all of my applications per se, or I may have other readers who read along with me and they read first, and then I may read second. And then if there's some ones that we don't, maybe there's some discrepancy or ones that we really need to talk out, then maybe we get into a smaller, committee or group to have further discussions. Sometimes you may just have a group of people that you all have a set of applications and you are working as a committee and a group to discuss these applications. At Berkeley, I'll use as an example, we definitely don't do committee in that way. Last year, we had about 113,000 applications. There's no way we could get through that many to do what we do. However, each particular applicant is read at least twice by two different people. So and that's a part of it. So you're getting different viewpoints by two different people, which is part of the checks and balances. And why we bring ourselves, we also talk about this being a human process. And that's a way to kind of get two different viewpoints on an individual. And sometimes you'll be read by more than just those two individuals based on how they may be reviewing you and how they're kind of seeing where you're falling within our applicant pool and contextually where you're attending school. So it really does depend. I've even been at school where it's just one reader and you make the determination, so it very much depends, Brandon. Even if you go through that initial review, you then go into another part a lot of times that some of us have called selection, where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of what does our institution, what do we need? What are priorities for our institution? And those are things you all have no control over. And that's a hard part to kind of capture and kind of understand as a student who's applying, and we totally understand that, but we're controlling that when it comes to the priorities, and that selection piece is when we're really building our class. And again, that's going to look different per school because each of us are very distinct and we are looking for different things at each school depending on whatever priorities have been set by leadership. So it really does depend, Brandon. I think that's a great question. And I think when you kind of keep working on your college list and kind of get it down to what are those key schools that you definitely plan to attend, or just some schools that you're still having these conversations, ask them that. Ask them more about their admissions process and what that may look like. I think that's always great information for you all to have to better understand our world a little better and how we go about it so that you can better understand it and understand also why it's so important that you tell your story, because you may have more than one person reading your application and we, again, may take different things from it. But the bottom line is you dictate that. I think Sean said that, you provide what you want. It's not about thinking about what we want as an admissions officer. You tell your story, you dictate this process. Again, it's all about you. And so that's important to remember.
Thank you, Jua. Jason, Inger has a wonderful question. How do you handle a less than stellar transcript in an application?
That's a great question. From my perspective at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, we're a selective institution, but we accept more students than we reject. We're accepting just over 60% of the students that apply. In terms of a less than stellar transcript, for students that are worried about that, think about the fact that there are 4,000 colleges and universities, and I believe it's something like more than 90% accept more than half of their application. Half of the applications they receive are accepted. So rest assured, there is a home for you if you're worried about your transcript. But when I'm reviewing an application, I'm looking for reasons to accept a student. So it might be an upward trend. Maybe you had earlier grades that were troublesome. You maybe switched high schools early on and needed a year to get on your feet. We're going to look at that upward trend as a positive as a positive thing. Maybe you had more recent lower grades, but there's context for that. The more context we have, the better. Maybe you were supporting your family during a difficult time. Of course, we're talking about all of this within a global pandemic. Let us know what's going on. Let us know why. We don't know what we don't know. The one big thing that I see frequently is that students forget to tell us how many hours a week they're working, or how many hours a day they're commuting to school. If we know these things, we can take that into account, and understand that, okay, you're, doing your homework in your car on the way to school. No wonder that the teacher had something to say about your, handwriting on your assignments or something. The more context we have, the better. But at so many institutions, we are looking for reasons to accept you.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah.
So we have lots of questions, and I don't think we're going to get through all of them, but we're going to do our best. Jua, can you please take this one? I have high functioning autism. Should I explain that in my personal statement? And would it help my application?
Definitely. I'll go back to something Jason just talked about. He mentioned, the example of someone riding a bus 2 hours to and from school and how that affects them being able to complete their coursework. So yes, if you have autism, that is a part of your world. That is your life. And it's something that we need to understand. Something I always try to stress to students is that we cannot assume. That is not a part of this process. You have to blatantly tell us. Now, you can decide how much you want to share with us. That deals with your comfortability level. But understand that this is private. This is a safe space. But we need to understand that, especially, I think we had a question about if your grades have been impacted, maybe there's certain curriculum that you may have been placed into, maybe that has limited your ability to be involved in certain extracurricular activities. It's a lot of different things that come with, clearly if you have autism, how that again affects your world. That I need to know, because I don't know. And again, I cannot assume. So that's where you have to advocate for yourself. We talk about being advocates for yourself. That's where you have to advocate. So that is very much something that we need to know. That is where letters of recommendation can come into play. Individuals that have worked with you and understand how special you are and what you bring to the table, and maybe give us another component of if you have autism, how that may affect you in the school setting potentially. So that is something else. So that is very, very important. Not to mention the other part of that is when you come to our campus, hopefully that we also can support you as a student. So we all have, for instance, we have our disabled students program. I'm gonna give us as an example that helps you be able to thrive at Berkeley. So we need to know that up front. So if you come to us from day one, what do you need to do your best on our campus? And all different campuses have this type of kind of services, to make sure that you have what you need to thrive. And that's another key component to sharing that with us. And sometimes students don't, but we, and that's always for me, that's disappointing, because I don't feel like I'm getting the best chance to know you. And I think you're not giving yourself the best chance in our processes. So it is advocacy. But again, if you come to us, ultimately also helping you thrive when you hit that campus so that you can have the best experience possible. So please do.
Thank you. Katarina, could you please talk about this one? During COVID, a lot of volunteer and nonprofit organizations were closed down in Samuel's area. How will not having as many opportunities affect his application?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think a lot of admissions offices have become a lot more understanding and accommodating because, we all understand that COVID really put a wrench into a lot of different plans that we have had. And I think when it comes to, in terms of like extracurricular activities that you include on your resume or just, the application itself, I think we understand that like it's okay that you didn't have as many opportunities in 11th, but maybe other opportunities became available to you. Like maybe you had to start taking care of your younger brother or something. Like you can include that on your application because that is another part of your identity, as we've been saying. Or maybe you had to start taking care of a sick grandparent. Like that's another thing that you can include as well. I think what we also saw when students, also in the application, they would say like, oh, unfortunately, I couldn't become a part of this opportunity because of COVID. They would make other parts of their application stand out. So that could be, the personal statement. You know, I saw a lot of really creative personal statements, and I think the transcript is also a really great place to make your application stand out, because at least you can control what you write for your personal statement, and at least you can also control your work ethic and the effort that you want to put into the classes and making sure that you really do well. But yeah, I would say definitely let the admissions officer know of your territory that unfortunately you were unable to take part in the different activities that you wish you could, but this is how you kind of made do with what happened.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just overwhelmed. There are still so many questions. We're excited that you are all so active and participatory in this session. We regret that we don't have enough time to answer all of these questions, but there are so many additional sessions that are taking place, and I know that the panelists there would be more than happy to address these questions. Go to the college fair and ask the individual people, representatives, about some of the questions that you have. So thank you again for joining us this morning. We hope that this session has been fruitful. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues, Sean, Jua, Jason, and Katarina. We really appreciate all of you for being with us today. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.